Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the latest fireside chat in our series of webinars. We are really happy to continue bringing experts in various fields with different information to all of you to help you through these challenging times that we're all experiencing. I'm Frank Niesenbaum, Vice President of Sales for E2B Tech and C2B Tech, and will be your host today. I'm very happy to welcome back Parker Wilson with Avalara. Hi, Parker.
Hey, Frank, thanks so much for having me.
Parker is going to be discussing for us sales taxes and specifically good conversation around exemption certificates and Nexus during and after the pandemic. Our goal is to keep providing information to help you all with your businesses and navigating through these unique times, as well as, eventually coming out on the other side stronger than ever. And it's kind of funny, we've been enjoying the warmth of these fireplaces behind us, but actually even here in Ohio, we're starting to actually see warmth and over 50-degree temperatures. So we may have to change the backgrounds as we continue. But even in these tough times and challenging times, we know that everyone's working differently. We remain confident that as things start opening up, which we're starting to see, we'll get through this and in the end be back on a vibrant path. So again, welcome, Parker. And in today's chat, as I mentioned, we will be talking about some very important sales tax topics. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a really quick poll question. It always helps us get a little bit of a gauge about some of the people in the audience. So we'd like to know how much you believe automation would help you and your team with managing sales tax exemption certificates. Options: it would not help, only help a little bit, or it would help a lot by easing the burden on your employees and businesses that you work with. Just give you a minute or so to answer the question. All righty. Thank you for giving us the information. And it's helpful for us just to get a little gauge, as I said. So, excuse me, we're going to get started. Parker, again, thanks for joining me. And the first question I have for you, Parker, is, when you look at businesses, how do businesses know if and when they really need to register in these states based on some of the new court rulings that have come out?
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. Great question. It becomes really difficult, right? And a lot of it has to do with not only the economic and what just recently come out, but also physical presence. So folks need to remember that. And because of all the changes on the rules and things that differ from state to state, we've actually tried to make this a lot easier for folks, and we've created a risk assessment tool that we have on our website that we can send to you and your team there at E2B, and you can send it out to your folks and even include it with this webinar. We can put it in the link here. But basically what this does is it helps them kind of fine tune and tell a little bit about their business itself, and then what we can do and kind of where we can potentially help as far as those risks and where they might have some holes in compliance.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, thinking about manufacturers and businesses, obviously with exempt customers, everybody's got them of some kind in most cases. Are they also affected by these new economic and Nexus rules in terms of their business?
Yeah, and this comes up a lot, Frank, where these folks that are reselling or selling to someone that's then going to use this product in the manufacturing of another good, they think that this doesn't apply to them. The reality is it does. And I've actually pulled a couple states here. I will be reading from some of their rulings here, but California, they have actually they exempt sales, including sales for resale, or included but exempt services are not included in the threshold. So what that means there is that they are including sales for resale, and they are including exempt sales, but not exempt services. Texas, they're including gross revenue for sales of products and taxable services into the state. And on the exempt side, exempt sales are included, and exempt services are included in that threshold. In your state of Ohio there, Frank, gross receipts are included from the sale of tangible personal property for storage, use, or consumption in the state from providing services that actually benefit, which is realized in that state. And also what's included is exempt sales and exempt services are included in the threshold. And then also the last one here is New York. Gross sales of tangible personal property delivered into the state, but taxable services are not included. Exempt sales are included in the threshold and count, but exempt services are not. And these are just a few. I also have another link that we can send over that we've put together each and individual state and what are included and what are not. But this is just a few, right? So I picked some of the larger states and your home state there of Ohio, Frank. But you can see there that it's not just taxable sales. And that's what a lot of folks think, is it's just taxable sales, but exempt sales are also included as well.
Yeah, and Parker, it's interesting listening to you talk, and you just rattled off, what, 4 or 5 states,
Yep.
and my head's already spinning, right? So
Right.
it's interesting when we talk about federal taxes, and I think that's the key to this, is federal taxes apply to everybody, but every state is different, and you just gave us some great examples. And I don't know if there are any other challenges these businesses face you want to elaborate on, or we can kind of, keep going from there. So. But as you go, so I know that a lot of people may be aware of the Streamlined sales tax program, another topic that I know we talked about a little bit last time, but kind of remind us a little bit about how that can help some of the exempt businesses and what they're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on, just want to talk a little bit about some issues that these folks may experience.
Great. Yep.
So based on our experience with manufacturers, the following challenges were cited as kind of the biggest struggles they face. Tracking thousands of SKUs, the cross taxability rules, getting the right rate and filing the reports correctly, surviving an audit, right? God forbid. Keeping track of all the smaller jurisdictions that they may deal with, ensuring a seamless process that is auditable, figuring out what is taxable and what isn't, right? Those are just to name a few. Drop shipping is a large issue that we have heard from folks that they run into. And just quickly touching on kind of the resellers. So resellers who want to kind of benefit from an exemption certificate must present the manufacturing and distributors with a current and effective proof of their resale intentions. And the most common form of this is that exemption certificate that we're speaking about here, Frank. And so in order for these exempt purchases and that information from each state or locality, when that reseller receives a product, the same rules really apply for sales made to a manufacturer or distributor, or for someone that's kind of forwarding that product on. And so folks just need to make sure that they're keeping track of that reseller certificate or that exemption certificate.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up you detail a little bit around the exemption thing. I know that over the years, a lot of people think, if somebody says they're tax exempt, that's good enough for me, right? They're tax exempt, but boy, there's a whole lot more to it. And those certificates are really, really important. And obviously, your solution and combine that with the system, gives somebody the backup, because those audits do happen. We see them in our clients, and you guys are helping make sure that runs smoothly. So that's good. And
Sure.
So, yeah, I talked about the Streamlined sales tax program. Maybe you can just kind of elaborate on that a little bit now.
Yeah. And I know we touched on this a little bit last time, and so I'll just give kind of a brief kind of description of it again. But the Streamlined Sales Tax Initiative or program, which is mandated outside of Avalara, is where 24 states got together to make sales tax more unified and tried to simplify the process, right? Where they put together similar rules and made sure that all the clients are kind of following a unified process. Where we see exempt businesses kind of falling in here is that exemption certificate, right? So with this mandated by the SST governing board, and leveraging Avalara's tools or having us be what they call a CSP, that exemption certificate has to be present. And so leveraging a tool like ours to help manage that exemption certificate, making it a more easy and effective use of not only their time, but also increasing customer satisfaction as well is something that we've seen. So what normally happens is they say, hey, Mr. Customer, we need your exemption certificate. And the customer says, well, I don't know what that is. I don't have that. And so our tool kind of makes that a more seamless process and increases that customer satisfaction with, instead of just saying, hey, we need your exemption certificate, you're sending them the ability to actually collect the proper one and have that kind of built in through one of our web portals.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful, really nice. I know that, it used to be once upon a time, we say, hey, can you give me your federal ID number or, something. And we thought that, having that number was enough to be, qualify as an exemption certificate, but there's obviously a lot more to it. And it'd be nice if all the states were the same, but they're not. And so it's nice that there's a way for you to facilitate them being able to gather the right information. Because again, coming back to that audit, you don't want to go through it. So Parker, that's helpful. Absolutely.
Sure.
So I in terms of, and I love this word, volunteer remitter. I love to call us all voluntary when we're dealing with sales tax. But I know there's some requirements about being qualified as a volunteer remitter. Maybe a topic people don't really understand, but how's that related, if there's anything with the requirements for that as it relates to non-taxable transactions? Is there something specific there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you hear the differentiation between volunteer and non-volunteer, it's a designation that the SST governing board put together. Because what you're doing, Frank, is you're basically getting registered in these states, potentially before you actually have that obligation, leveraging a company like Avalara to potentially do this for you at no additional cost or free, right? And so being a voluntary remitter means you actually meet their guidelines. Just a couple quick points there. The guidelines are $50,000 of property in the state, so meaning you have like a warehouse or a brick and mortar location. 50,000 under, so both of these are less. So less than $50,000 of property or less than $50,000 of payroll. So you actually have an employee in the state. So really what they're looking for is they're looking for remote sellers, right? They're trying to streamline the process behind having remote sellers register here. And what you see is some of the benefits that we provide is we do free registrations in these 24 states for voluntary remitters. We'll actually do a single identification number to file and pay the taxes in all 24 of these states. We'll do a uniform filing form as well as an exemption. So instead of having multiple exemptions for all these different states, there's one unified one, making it even easier than before. You get access to Avalara's boundaries and rules data. That's actually given to us by these SST states. So it's mandated by the states. They actually provide us with this information that we then use. So they can't come back to us and say, hey, you had the wrong data. The states actually give us that data, which is a really cool, and not a lot of companies can say that. And we also have centralized source of updating the information regarding these sales tax rules and regulations, kind of like what I just mentioned there. Then we also do free certified sales tax calculations within the software, free preparation and filing of the sales tax returns, and then we actually comes with audit support. So if they are to be audited, we'll provide some detail within these SST states, because we'll actually be the liaison because of our partnership with these states and how embedded we are with them. Yeah,
that in and of itself is nice to know that there's somebody backing up what's going on that has the knowledge of how all these things work together. That's got to be valuable. I know it is to our customers that leverage Avalara in their systems. So we're talking about obviously a lot about these exemptions and the tools that are there. So in terms of the businesses, obviously, whether it's e-commerce or just businesses doing business in a lot of states, right? So how these businesses probably have never been registered in these states before. They haven't done business there before. How are they going about, or how can they go about collecting these certificates from the different states? Obviously, with every state being different, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So great question there. Really, it's about kind of having that automated, repeatable process that not only helps increase that customer satisfaction, like we talked about before, but it also increases efficiency and reduces risk. And what I mean by that is what you mentioned before is just collecting that FEIN number, or what a lot of these folks are doing is just collecting that tax ID number.
Right.
You can't really report or have data around that. Whereas if you had a tool itself to manage the full life cycle of these certificates, you could run reports on when they expire, when they're coming up to expire, who signed it, things of that nature. So to make sure you have the right data on file, because like we talked about, if an audit were to arise, that's the first thing they're going to be looking for is why didn't you charge sales tax? And then in turn, looking directly into those exemption certificates. And so within the CertCapture tool, we have a certificate library that actually picks the most defensible certificate in case of an audit. And then you can also leverage our campaign feature, right, which gets to kind of the question itself on how to gain that certificate. It sends out a link that goes to our web portal, giving the client the ability to fill that certificate out right there online. So they don't have to go to the state's website to try to find the certificate, or rummage through their filing cabinet to find the right document that they've sent before. It gives them the ability to fill that document out right there online. So again, going back to increasing that customer satisfaction, making it so much easier for those folks to actually fill that certificate out and provide the right certificate.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on it. I was going to follow that up, and you hit on it perfectly. Customer facing. So you've got a tool or a portal. There's something there that, yeah, well, we need to be responsible for it, but the tool's going to make it, or the portal's going to make it so that they can actually fill it out, keep it updated, and do that with some prompting, that some automation around that. That sounds really interesting. So that's pretty standard, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so within our tool, yeah, it's standardized the way that folks can handle that, as far as making it a much easier process around the collecting that certificate up front. Also, the folks that potentially, as far as like e-commerce, when someone goes to check out, we have this hassle of rebilling the customer because they didn't provide that resale certificate up front. So you can actually get that web portal feature built into your website, so folks can actually fill that certificate out right there online, giving them the ability to complete the document without leaving the shopping cart experience. So making that a much easier process, and getting away from that hassle of rebilling and sending a new bill to the customer without the tax and having to give them the tax back, right?
Yeah, and that's good, and that's actually that's a great transition. That's kind of where I was going to go, and I know we touched on this a little bit last time as well, but obviously a lot of the companies excuse me, a lot of companies that we work with, and especially in the middle of a pandemic, right? A lot of companies are looking to do a lot more work and a lot more selling and interacting via the web, right? So there's a lot more online buying going on. The experience is different. So I have to imagine that, you mentioned a little bit right there, but the exempt customers have to be an issue. And then just in general, we talked about the different states and the different things they're doing. There have to be some real monster tax compliance challenges for these business. And I'm curious as to what you guys are seeing out there in terms of what's going on now, but it's probably going to be part of the new norm as we move forward into the future with online business.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going back to originally the the main issue is understanding where they actually have that obligation and finding that out. So it goes back to kind of that risk assessment tool that we have. So leveraging that, finding out where they actually have the obligation, then moving forward with, okay, well, do we have to collect an exemption certificate from these folks? Do we need to charge them sales tax?
Right.
And so determining those type of things becomes at the very forefront, and makes it really difficult for a small to medium sized business to understand not only these rules and guidelines that they have to follow, but then actually executing on that and doing it properly.
Yeah, it's got to be challenging when you're doing business in what could be 50 states or I guess even international, without some kind of tool on the backside. I'm just not sure how that experience happens without automation.
Right.
So it's good to hear that that's something you guys have been thinking about and adding to the tools to make it easier for businesses. So we talked a lot about sales taxes and all the different exemptions, all the things we have to keep track of. And I've heard the word audit at least, I don't know, once or twice through this conversation that we've had over the last 20 minutes or so. But so in your experience, what's that process like, when you're responding to a sales tax audit with or without an automated tool? And I'm going to guess that there's some advantages with the automation.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so, first and foremost, in no way do we want to sell on fear by any means.
Right.
But the reality of it is that an audit potentially can arise, especially with states needing money, right? Coming out of
Yeah.
the pandemic. I mean,
Right.
what a better way to gain revenue than potentially. And before the pandemic, we were actually seeing some states add auditors. But really, what we've seen in these small businesses is they're going to get audited because of their larger vendor that they're managing or dealing with, as far as on a customer basis. They're the ones that get audited, and then they come downstream finding other folks that aren't doing the process properly. So it's a great time to get an automated tool in place to kind of to make sure that is not the case. What we've seen without an automated tool, just kind of paint a quick picture here. The CFO gets a call. They need all the exemption certificates within the month of April. And they have to get that to them in the next 2 weeks to that auditor. So the CFO says, well, I don't even know if we have those, right? So he calls down to the accounts receivable department. Hey, can you get a hold of all the exemption certificates in April? And they say, oh, well, the accounts receivable person just went on vacation, right? It's July or whatever have you. So they're like, okay, well, there's this giant fire drill going on. Well, we have to find these certificates in the next 2 weeks, or we're going to be assessed the sales tax, the fines, the penalties, and interest. So they have to rummage through a filing cabinet. I've even heard, Frank, some folks, they keep it in a shoebox. So they have to find these certificates. They have to get the right ones. They not only do they need to make sure that the right ones are on file, but then if they find out that the right ones aren't on file, they have to reach out to the customer and get a new one. So you see how this can potentially create not only a lot of stress on the team, where this is not their day-to-day job is looking through exemption certificates or figuring out this, or just being a sales tax professional in general. Their day-to-day is dealing with the accounts receivable functions. The CFO's day-to-day is trying to save them time, money, and increase efficiency, right? And so kind of to those points, leveraging an automated tool, I mean, it does all of that, right? It gives them the ability to where they don't have to have this fire drill of running around figuring out, hey, do we have the right ones on file? The tool itself is ensuring that kind of at a proactive approach. So instead of being extremely reactive, very proactive approach of getting those certificates updated, letting you know that in 30, 60, or 90 days that certificate will become expiring. And so when the auditor comes in, you can actually take a snippet of the returns, or excuse me, of the actual exemptions, and put that together, send it directly to the auditor, and they can be out of your hair very quickly. And so we've seen a lot of clients that leverage not only our calculation engine, but our exemption certificate tool. It makes it a much easier and simplified process as far as dealing with an audit as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, historically we probably all business owners, consultants, whoever we are in this business, think about sales tax. Okay, how do we calculate it, right? It's complex enough, just the rates and the street address level, whatever we have to deal with, which I know that your solution handles all of that for them, and we don't have to deal with it. But I'm not sure that everybody gave the exemption certificate issue enough thought in terms of that part of the audit. And I know we've talked about this a lot in conversations with clients and prospects, respective clients, about why the exemption certificate is a pain. And you touched on it. It can be costly, right? So we're talking
Absolutely.
about fines and back taxes and late penalty or payment penalties and things like that. So, you know, that this whole conversation, I think, is really helpful to people to get clarity around the whole exemption process. Just to kind of put you on the spot just a little bit as we wrap up, you know, we talked about the 22 states or whatever it is that have a kind of a consortium for sales tax capability. Do you see, you know, I'm asking to look into your crystal ball. Do you see more states joining that, other groups like that joining up? I mean, is a national sales tax something that would make it all better or worse? I'm just curious what your thoughts about some of that are.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that the SST program is set up and the technology that you need as a state to kind of follow their guidelines, to put it in perspective, Missouri's been trying to get into that program for 3 years.
Wow.
They haven't been able to join. What we are actually seeing is some states, like Pennsylvania has just recently done this. They're taking this on themselves to allow companies like Avalara to be a CSP, and they're creating their own state guidelines. So Pennsylvania has quasi joined this program, but not necessarily part of the SST program. But it's a similar program that Avalara is able to provide. And so we kind of roll it into the SST program, but it's not defined as the same rules and guidelines that the SST program put together, just because they didn't want to be part of that overall 24 state SST governing board program, if you will.
Yeah, they don't all like each other anyway, so they probably don't want to be part of the same group half the time.
Right.
So that's awesome, Parker, and I really appreciate your joining me today, and hopefully we provided some insight into some really important topics for our customers, for prospects, and anybody that's listening. I would encourage people, if you have questions or even thoughts. I mean, I know you guys do a lot of work with us and our clients before they even get into any software, and you talked about the tools and the things that our people can do. I encourage you to reach out to someone at E2B Tech, or, you know, to let us know that you have questions around sales tax. We'll connect you with the right people with Avalara or someone internally that can help. And again, I really appreciate it. I think this is knowledge that people really need to have as they do business now, and they're going to keep doing it in the future. It's more important all the time. And I loved your comment that obviously you've seen the increase in sales tax audits. I think we are going to see more because states are hurting, right? And they're going to need revenue, and one of the best ways to get it is sales taxes. So that was awesome, Parker. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Always appreciate the opportunity. And to your point, I mean, we don't have to talk about automation. We can just talk about sales tax education, and I can provide some details there. So make sure your clients feel that we don't have to jam software down their throat if they're not ready for it. We can certainly just talk about kind of education as a whole. And so I'm happy to do that. Been here for 7 years, so have more knowledge than most in the sales tax space. So happy to share my knowledge as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it is education. So again, thank you, and we hope this information's been helpful to all of you out there. We look forward to you hopefully joining us in our next webinar, as you can see on the screen. Another really important topic for the world, accounts receivable collections. So here we are talking about paying taxes. It's also going to be very helpful to learn how we can help you save and collect the money you've got coming to you, and make that process a lot easier and automated. So again, thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day, and everybody stay safe out there. Thanks, Parker.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.